Hey, welcome to Film Fanatics, three film geeks discussing movies both new and old. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joe.
Before we get to our best of 2015 mini-sode, it's time for one last slate of brand new releases, including awards hopefuls Joy and the Danish Girl, Tina Fey and Amy Poehler as sisters, and Alvin and the Chipmunks taking a road trip. Or a road chip, as it were. We also have two home media moments for you this week, foreign film Force Majeure and Patrick Stewart in Match. It's also time for our annual most anticipated list, so we'll count down the films in 2016 that we're most looking forward to, and we start Guilty Pleasure Month as well with Justin's pick, Armageddon, and our Oscar A to Z, a 1935 movie called Becky Sharp. Alright, well first up is Joy. This is the latest David O. Russell film to team Jennifer Lawrence, Bradley Cooper, and Robert De Niro. It's based on product inventor Joy Mangano, played by Lawrence, whose creation of a self-wringing mop brought her success through the QVC network after many stumbling blocks, including an ex-husband she's still close with, and divorced parents who are all living under the same roof as her, and her being massively in debt. Virginia Madsen supports as Joy's mom, De Niro is her father, Cooper is the head of QVC, and Isabella Rossellini plays Joy's business partner / her father's girlfriend. The third time was not quite the charm for Russell with these leads. While Silver Linings Playbook and American Hustle are both, for me, modern masterpieces, Joy definitely falls short. Not so short that it's a negative grade, but Joy gets bogged down with a lot of unnecessary and unenjoyable side plots. The first 20 minutes or so, I was really wondering if it was going to get better. Luckily it does. The rest of the film strives to make up for that disappointing opening, and for the most part it does. Lawrence and Cooper again have great rapport, and she keeps this movie moving, even when the uneven script from Bridesmaids co-writer Annie Mumolo and Russell himself lets her down a little bit. I leave Joy with a B. Joe?
Well, as you know, I'm not like a huge David Russell fan.
No.
I think
I'm the big one.
I know. I think he does good movies, but I feel like they're often too safe. Like, I don't think there's really anything stylistically amazing about them. You know, but the stories are usually pretty good, which I think is the key to his movies. And this one, I think there's a good story in there somewhere, and that's following Lawrence's character and really her as a character. And I think her performance is so good that it kind of holds this movie up. But
absolutely.
But if it wasn't for that, though, and you know, a lot of this would be much more of a struggle. And I will admit, though, for me, it was not exactly in the first 20 minutes. It was kind of like in and out, up and down throughout the whole thing. Like, I agree. I thought a lot of the subplots just were either underdeveloped or they weren't interesting.
Yeah, like the you know, the stuff with her mom and the handyman, like that was sort of out of left field and sort of left on the floor.
And this movie is filled with scenes like that, with just all these things that don't go anywhere. Like, literally, there is a subplot with her mother kind of falling in love with the handyman, but literally it's like mom has problems,
like
meets handyman, oh, they're in love now?
Right.
Resolution.
Interesting. I kind of want to know more about that, but it just comes off as weird and kind of random. Why is it even here? There's a lot of that. And then I feel like the writers are kind of beating you over the head with this metaphor of that Joy's life is kind of like a soap opera with all these intercuts of
I didn't like that part. I'm
which
glad that they dropped that as the movie went on.
They did, but there was a lot of it. And,
in the beginning and probably up to the middle there really was.
And they were kind of painful. Like, I know I guess it's an exaggeration, but most soap operas are better acted than that.
Yeah.
It was pretty rough. For me, I was just kind of hoping, you know, I have a suspicion that this movie is going to get better when Bradley Cooper shows up. Thankfully, it does. Mm-hmm. Like, I was so glad to see him, because I think that...
They kept him at bay for a while, though. It's almost half the movie that goes by before we see him.
And finally, though, once, you know, they have that interaction and her struggle becomes much more focused on her, it does get better. And there's actually some serious tension there. But once again, we don't get the full story because a lot of it was bogged down. So I felt like her struggle was kind of sabotaged. Like, okay,
I agree.
I get that she's gone through some stuff. I get that... You know, I get that this was a big deal, but it didn't really seem like it ultimately was, you know? Mm-hmm. Like, okay, so she has to do this, and then everything was fine, and now she's a success. I feel like there's just better stories out there. So, I don't know. Like, there's definitely potential, but if it wasn't for her great performance and, you know, some really good stuff towards the end of the movie, I think it would have been much worse for me. This one's, like, kind of middling. I leave it with a C+.
Oh, okay. Justin?
I'd like to take this time to formally apologize to Jennifer Lawrence. I am truly sorry that, as an actress, she gave another great performance in a movie that I can only describe as half-assed. My love-hate relationship with David O. Russell continues as he gives us a movie that starts out as a, frankly, rather mediocre psychological character study, then a rise-to-power biopic that comes in for basically no reason at about 40 minutes in. That's interesting for about 20 minutes, but once Bradley Cooper goes away, only to end up circling back to the same original let's throw everything at the screen and hope something works for the conclusion. I leave Joy with a C-.
Ooh.
Well, I mean...
It wasn't very good, though.
It was frantic, I'll give it that. To be fair, I mean, Justin mentioned on an earlier podcast that he was kind of sick of seeing Lawrence and Cooper together, and, you know... So I know you weren't really even looking forward to this one. I was looking forward to it and was very disappointed by it because, you know, his last string of movies were all A's or A+s for me.
They were solid pieces, with the exception of
Accidental
Love.
Accidental Love we don't count because that was like 6 years ago. I mean, the last three he actually did, not released.
Right.
Pretty solid movies.
But, you know, but you don't like The Fighter, and I think The Fighter's a great film.
I gave it a B-. I think it's incredibly overrated, absolutely, but I don't think it's a bad film. Certainly not in this caliber.
To be completely honest, I mean, I actually watched it recently because when you guys brought it up, I think it might be my favorite of his movies.
I think it's a fantastic movie. It deserved the nominations it got. Some people won acting from it. It's a great movie.
Once again, though, all those movies they're very enclosed in their story. They're solid, you know, but I don't feel like anything, like in terms of the editing or cinematography or choices, he doesn't seem to take many risks with his movies. I think the biggest risk he may have taken was Silver Linings, with, you know, the relationship between two kind of mentally
uneven,
emotionally unstable individuals. But at the end of the day, it's just kind of a decent love story with great cast.
I don't know. I thought American Hustle had some interesting things.
Setting the time period. I mean, he's got his own style. The problem for me is I think he's anti-Danny Boyle in terms of... I'll go see a Danny Boyle movie with an expectation. Danny Boyle will usually give me the exact opposite of what I'm expecting, and I'll usually end up liking him more for it. With maybe the exception of Steve Jobs, but that's a story from another day.
Well, you know, for me, I guess you could compare the two as, you know, the way I feel about Danny Boyle is the way you feel about David O. Russell. I mean, I love Slumdog Millionaire. You love Silver Linings Playbook. But Danny Boyle's done a lot of things I don't care for. You know, 127 Hours was good. Actually, it was really good. Millions was really good. But, like, what was the one where they go to the sun?
I
give that an F. That was a terrible movie. I didn't like Jobs. Or Steve Jobs, I should say. The one that Danny Boyle actually did.
Jobs Overload, but go on.
So, you know, I mean, I that's a good example because I feel the same way about him that you feel about David O. Russell.
Well, to continue my point, though, David O. Russell, in contrast, is more like, this is what I'm putting out for public consumption. You don't like it, too bad. Here it is. And I think it's ridiculous.
I don't think that's true at all. Why do you think he does that and Danny Boyle doesn't, though?
Danny Boyle
makes his movie himself and puts it out.
Danny Boyle at least ease you into it. David O. Russell just sort of throws it on a plate and shoves it in your general direction. And
maybe more of a marketing decision, though.
Yeah, how so? I'm not sure I'm getting the metaphor.
Take, for example, Trance. We have an intro. We sort of work our way into this crazy little psychological world. Let's take Joy. Joy opens up with an incredibly obnoxious black and white soap opera-esque bit that I just found myself staring at the screen saying, why is this here? It does eventually justify itself in a way, but ultimately just sort of throws itself at you and hopes that you'll accept it.
Well, listen, we've all three said that the first 15 to 20 minutes of Joy is not very engaging. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to counter that. You're not wrong in this particular instance. But I'm sorry, the first 10 minutes of Silver Linings Playbook is fantastic. American Hustle as well. That first scene of American Hustle where they're in the hotel room and he's messing up his hair. I mean, if that doesn't grab you, you don't watch the movie. I mean...
I was just using that as an example.
I mean, that's the example I'm going off of. Cause
that's
what you
fair.
said. I mean, yeah, I agree. The beginning of Joy is very frantic and erratic and honestly not written all that well. It's only until it sort of veers away from that the movie gets good.
QVC.
And even that's sort of brief.
No, I think it's when she sort of invents the mop itself. When she's, outside of Kmart, when she's talking to Isabella Rossellini. Oh. I was engaged at that part. But you're right. When Cooper comes into it, then it's really a whole nother movie. Yeah. It's good.
It's the movie that was advertised.
Yeah, but again,
To
I
an
mean
extent.
that's the marketing team. You know,
Yeah.
I think we harp on the previews a lot on this show, and that's not necessarily the filmmaker's vision.
No.
you
And
know,
let's be realistic here. Out of all the people you know, how many of them would go see the Miracle Mop movie?
I don't know if Jennifer Lawrence and Bradley Cooper are in it, probably a lot.
It's still the Miracle Mop movie. It's not exactly the world's sexiest pitch.
That's part of the problem is that if you're going to tell a story that's that inspirational, you have to go into a lot more detail about all the focusing on the individual, because at the end of the day, the story that was presented is not that interesting. It's cool. It's cool that
I agree.
Like, okay, she invents this mop. That is cool, but that is literally not very good for narrative fiction. It just isn't that interesting.
I mean, case in point, Flash of Genius.
It's a good thing to happen to you in
That
real
was a great
life,
movie.
but without all
But it didn't
these
sell.
without all these different things happening to
Right.
present problems, it's not going to be that interesting. And
Well, okay, that's fine. But to go back to the Danny Boyle metaphor, guess what? Jobs was a big fat bomb because we're sick of Steve Jobs movies. So even if you present, I mean, you guys enjoyed that movie more than I did, but even if you present a clear vision of what the movie is, doesn't necessarily mean people are going to go see it. I mean, look at Everest. Everest didn't do very well. The Walk didn't do very well. These are movies that we can all agree were pretty good,
they're pretty good, yeah.
So, I mean, you could go in circles all day about, are they going to go see it if they promote it as the Miracle Mop movie? That's fine. All they really needed to promote about this movie is what they did. It's from the guy that did Silver Linings Playbook and American Hustle, and Jennifer Lawrence and Bradley Cooper and Robert De Niro are all in it and back together. You love these people. You love them when they do David O. Russell movies. Go watch Joy.
Yeah.
And it made $18 million opening weekend. So, I mean,
That's going to break even.
yeah. I mean, my point is, no, they didn't really need to market it as the Miracle Mop movie, but they didn't really market it as anything specifically. I don't
No.
think a lot of people knew what the movie was about going into it, which of course I like, but some people don't. Some people want to know everything about what the movie's going to entail.
I was actually disappointed by
I like some mystery.
that presentation. I mean, mystery's good. I thought you got the general idea it was a woman struggling, but it's just like they're clever things like, talking about shakedowns and then her shooting somebody. Ooh, it's a David O. Russell movie. There's going to be some mob stuff. No, it's QVC backstabbing, which is, let's be honest,
Joe,
it's not that interesting.
It's David O. Russell. Yes, there will be some arguably organized crime stuff.
But there wasn't.
Though in most cases it's basically like in name only or glorified cameo.
Is that a guarantee? There wasn't any mob stuff in Silver Linings Playbook.
Philly, there's mobsters somewhere.
Come on. And there were, there
crime.
wasn't mob stuff in The Fighter. It was boxing stuff.
Yeah, but they were people like betting
They
on
talk
the
a little
bets.
bit about some of
Some shady people.
some of Dickie's backdoor stuff, but
Come on, Justin. Sometimes you just set yourself up. Dickie's backdoor stuff.
well,
All right.
it's not
All
my-
right, we
I
should
didn't pick
move
his
on.
name,
Let's
but
move
let's
on.
go.
Up next is Sisters. Joe, that's with you.
Oh, man. Sisters goes along like this. One sister, Tina Fey, has just lost her job and is struggling to be a responsible parent to her daughter. Another sister, this one played by Amy Poehler, is perhaps too responsible and never seems to have any real fun. But the two sisters decide to throw one last house party in their home in Orlando before their parents sell the family home. I have to say, this movie kind of follows along the pretty standard, raunchy, party comedy movies that you might expect. I think we get to see both these ladies do what they do best, and they have great chemistry with each other, which, once again, is kind of a focus of the director knowing that, and the script being catering to that, plus probably a lot of improv. So it's basically what you expect. I think if you like these two actresses together, which I do, you'll really like this movie. And I feel like it's very predictable. I could see some people being kind of bored with it, but personally, I loved it. I had a great time watching it, laughed a lot. The only negative part of the movie is I feel that the dramatic components were kind of a little too forced. Like, they needed a little more time to balance them out. They weren't bad, but there was so much time focused on the comedy and the hijinks and all the stuff going on that I found myself not really caring too much about one sister's issue versus the other. That part could have been done a little bit better. But had that been fleshed out, I think you would have had a perfect comedy. So I leave it with an A-.
Wow, all right. Justin?
Poehler and Faye have undeniable chemistry, but what's the problem with that? Often it feels like...
Joe would say nothing.
Well, speaking...
Wait, I'm laughing. Hold on.
that this duo just doesn't seem to want to do a movie with an actual script. The first 40 minutes of this feel less like a movie and more like the Faye and Poehler improv show. basically just letting them go on their own ordeal, and hopefully they get a chuckle or two. I'm not going to lie, they're effective at times. At others, they miss the mark in abundance, but once we get to the initial party that's sort of the backbone of the movie, it gets more sporadically entertaining. There's a really great cameo, and then comes the straw that broke the camel's back with the unbelievably tacked on epilogue. That just honestly for me felt like somebody told them at the last second, hey, this is coming out on Christmas, what can we do? Ooh, we'll have the ending on Christmas and we'll have a weird moment. It's just awkward and doesn't really have any business being there whatsoever. I leave Sisters with a C+.
Well, as I kind of expected, I'm right in between you guys. I definitely think the comedy is hit or miss. But I did like that the comedians swapped their normal roles to try something a little bit different. They obviously have chemistry. They always do, as Joe said. But, Joe, you hit it. I think it'll very much matter if the viewer appreciates their camaraderie or if it's stale for them. For me, I'm a fan. I love Tina Fey. I think she's brilliant. I like Amy Poehler a lot. I think Tina Fey is much better in things that she has scripted herself. You know, at times it most definitely feels like the duo and the whole cast is having more fun than the audience, especially in some of the party scenes. Some of the supporting players I think are great. Some are grating. I had mixed feelings about the daughter subplot because it really was a struggle for me to kind of get on board with Tina Fey's character when she's so clearly a neglectful parent.
Yeah.
And that they were mining that for laughs I didn't really love.
No.
I get that was her character, and obviously she's going to turn it around by the end of the picture, but it took a little bit of time for me to get on board with that. I'm going to leave it with a B-. I think it's sort of on par with a lot of those recent Seth Rogen comedies that we talked about with Night Before. I mean, it's like Neighbors, Night Before for me, and that like some of the jokes really hit when they do, they're hilarious, and then you'll have a minute or two where they're like trying stuff that's not really working.
Well,
you know,
once again, it's interesting because Night Before I thought the whole movie was funny.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so
yeah.
it must be something similar.
It was like 60-40.
Yeah, well, you know, I maybe I just like the cast in that particular instance or this one because I will admit that.
Yeah. Listen. I like this. I like these two ladies a lot. Some of the supporting players I thought were annoying.
Oh yeah.
You know, Bobby Moynihan, who's the guy that was doing the Scarface bit. He's on SNL. He's one of the worst people out there. He's not funny ever. You know, everything he was doing here fell flat. There was a couple other people I didn't like. Maya Rudolph was great. You know, she plays
usual.
like the enemy. Yeah, she is always great. You know, John Cena, we saw it in Trainwreck. Once again, he's hilarious here.
It's pretty good.
You know, when he's, telling him what all drugs he has out. And,
that was hilarious scene, yeah.
You know, that was really good.
He needs to be in more stuff.
He does need to be in more stuff.
He's good.
But I agree, Joe. I did get the sense that a lot of this was improvised, which I'm okay with, but
look,
it has to work.
I'll tell you that though, I didn't mind the fact that it was improv. One negative of the movie I forgot to mention, which was surprised neither of you guys did, is that some of the shots were pretty bad. Like, you know how like the editing clips where you can tell it's obviously just them doing gag reels? They literally inserted them.
Okay.
Like you're
I actually didn't notice that.
Like in the beginning when they meet the love interest, Amy Poehler, like, oh, you're like a this.
Oh, that's
cut.
true.
You're like
yeah.
a that. Like this is obviously something you put at the end,
right?
And they said, let's try a couple of them. I thought that was funny, but it was very clumsily edited. So that's a negative, I guess.
Well, I feel like that's kind of an Apatow thing. You know,
Yes.
not that he had anything to do with this movie,
No,
but
no.
obviously, you know, we saw that like in This Is 40 with the Melissa McCarthy character taking, you know, Paul Rudd to the principal's office about the Tom Petty son, and you know, you could sort of tell that she was just riffing, and they were kind of sticking in a couple here and there, and then saving the rest for later.
I thought it was pretty noticeable in this one, though.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't really think of that because that was a particularly funny scene, so I was enjoying myself watching it. But yeah, you're right. They had some obvious cuts.
Yeah.
I mean, to give a brief counterpoint, it was the most noticeable at the start. I thought it got a little bit better once we started diving into the story in that regard. But the first 40 minutes, they were just shoving so many random things in there to keep it going. To be honest, though, Dan, I was almost with you on the B- until we got to the epilogue.
I was fine with the epilogue. I didn't have any problems with that. What really brought me down from a B to a B minus was just thinking back over all of the comedies we've had this year. You know, I gave Trainwreck and Spy both B pluses, and to put this one just a shade under that, I didn't. Yeah, I didn't feel right about. Trainwreck is brilliantly written compared to this.
At least that one had an idea of what they were trying to do with the drama. Not necessarily the best way of inserting it, but at least knowing that like there can be some dramatic components, which I feel like this was trying to do at times. And I think if they had just spent a little bit more time with that instead of improvising, I know I'm the hater of that in this group, but I think you're right, Joe. When it's not good, it sticks out like a sore thumb.
I didn't mind the drama scenes. I think they flowed better here than in Trainwreck. That was, as we talked about, one of my big problems with Trainwreck is the drama scenes didn't quite know where to go with it. Mm-hmm. Here, I did think it fit in. I didn't mind the ending at all, Joe.
I didn't even...
That didn't bother you, right?
I didn't think about it. I thought it was about similar to Joy being a Christmas movie because they snow at the end. I'm like, I mean, if they added it in the last minute, I didn't mind. It happened to be in Christmas. It's... A lot of things happen. I don't know. It's time skip. Whatever.
Yeah, I think the epilogue here worked for me better than Night Before. That was like super obvious and tacked on.
Yeah, well, that was pretty bad.
This, I think it did at least flow with the rest of the feeling of the movie.
Yeah.
But all right, let's move on to the Danish Girl. Justin, that's with you.
After modeling as a woman for his wife, Gerda Wegener, played by Alicia Vikander for, I believe, the 5th time this year, Einar, played by Eddie Redmayne, soon begins to struggle with his overall identity. He gradually begins to take on a new one as a woman named Lily Elde, and embarks on what would soon be the first attempt at sex reassignment surgery. But, listeners, this is Redmayne being Eddie Redmayne. In 5 years, I feel like I'm going to probably end up calling him Male Merrill. But,
whoa.
I mean, it's far more a compliment than an insult. The guy is ridiculously talented, and he continues to prove it here. I feel like director Tom Hooper, who I criticized last episode as making quite possibly the most claustrophobic epic of all time, Les Mis. But I think with this, it complements the atmosphere so much more, letting the actors really come to life here. I think by far the best stuff in this movie is the just back and forth between Redmayne and Vikander. Absolutely incredible material, at times emotionally heartbreaking, others touching. And I also thought the other gentleman that I didn't mention in my synopsis, Matthias Schoenaerts from Far From the Madding Crowd, did a really good job as an old friend of Eddie Redmayne's character in this that adds an extra dimension to this. I also thought it added a lot of interesting context of what it meant to be transgender during a time where I think it was arguably the most taboo.
It was illegal.
And outside of that, with the exception of a kind of hokey conclusion, it's a really great movie. I leave with an A-.
Just the hokey ending? Is there anything else that bugged you?
Well, I mean,
I'm serious.
No, that's a fair statement, Joe. The ending did kind of bother me. I will admit that.
Okay.
I also think the moments without Vikander kind of drift a little bit. Some are not every scene without them is bad. It's just doesn't have the same punch as when it's just those two going back and forth, sort of seeing the evolution of these two characters, if you will.
I got you.
Yeah, no, there's obviously a lot to like about this film. The performances are fantastic. I'm assuming you're saying male Merrill in terms of like he's going to be up for Oscars every year, or what do you mean by that statement?
More or less, just ridiculously talented. Everyone seems to be on board with him.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you something. I think Vikander is even better than Redmayne here.
Oh.
I think both are great, but I think she's the only one whose character gets to have a sweeping range of emotions.
Aha.
I think the movie is remarkably safe. I think it's the kind of movie that gets made so Oscar voters and older audience members can feel progressive without actually delving into a lot of the nitty-gritty of the subject matter, and that really bothered me.
Okay.
I think it's a really good movie. Don't get me wrong, I certainly wasn't bored. I very much enjoyed it. Great performances, but it's far too polished, too safe to be a great one. I leave it with a B+.
Okay.
I debated right up until even like writing my review. Is like, is this a B or a B+? I guess it's a B+ because of the performances, but
I am.
It's too safe.
Well, I'm glad to hear your thoughts about it because I will admit I wasn't sure how I felt about this one. I'm still kind of trying to wrap my head around it. I saw it today, so I'm still seeing it. I think it's one of those things where definitely there is some powerful stuff here. And once again, though, I know you guys both loved his performance in the Stephen Hawking movie.
There we go.
Personally, I thought his performance was better here, actually. I thought he was really tackling a very, very complicated thing. I mean, because it's interesting. I think the movie would be, people might go into it thinking it's about gender identity, but I think it goes much further than that. It's about identity. I mean, he really feels like he is a different person, and I think it is trying to be somewhat progressive in that sense. But I also agree that we don't really get to dive too far into anything about it. We see it, and we get to know it from the performances, but really it's more about his wife and what she goes through, and
which is why she gives the better performance. They give her something to do.
No, she has a lot. It's all on the surface is a movie about transgenders and about this experimentation and identity, but really it's a really tragic love story about letting go. That's what this movie is really about.
It is.
So that it's not what you think it is. But his performance is great. I thought they did a good job with the makeup. Obviously, costumes were good. I thought it looked pretty. I thought it was well shot. But I don't know. I think the shift of focus was a little off, and I just feel like there's something missing with that one. Still, I mean, I still enjoyed it though. Leaving that into account, I'm gonna leave it with an A- as well.
Well, Joe, it brings up an interesting point about a movie that you mentioned this maybe a couple of weeks ago. I can't remember the movie exactly, but this is a story where there is no real villain. There is no, enemy. It's just, this is life. I can't remember what movie we were talking about.
Was Trumbo?
Yeah, Trumbo.
Maybe it was Trumbo.
Yeah, there's no...
another Oscar bait movie. But you're right. I mean, there's no villain here. He's not out to, hurt his wife, and she's certainly, not out to hurt anybody.
No,
everybody's just trying to be honest with themselves and be honest with each other, and be honest about who they are and what they can accept, and in that respect, I think it's interesting.
Yeah.
But it's not enough. It doesn't give enough. I don't think.
It's like it's lacking in the energy needed to move the story forward completely. Propel it forward.
Yeah,
it doesn't feel completely executed.
I mean, the closest thing this movie has to an antagonist is maybe society in general, or just even themselves to some extent.
I don't know. That one doctor was pretty bad.
That's where I was going with society. But
well, yeah, but I mean, you'll get this. That was literally,
a scene.
Yeah, I mean, that was... Well, I was going to say it was accurate.
I want to...
That was also a fair statement, but...
Actually, since you brought that up, that one scene where he gets attacked, what did he say that they picked up on that? Because I thought
that scene really bothered me,
because I'm
actually.
like, literally he just said hi, and then they just assumed that he's gay or something.
Mm-hmm.
I was like...
Yeah, at that point he was dressed as a man.
He was talking to the guy, he said hi.
Walking down the street. I mean, he wasn't like swishing.
Like, I know what they were trying to do, but there was literally no reason.
That scene actually really bothered me. I'm glad you brought that up.
That was really weird.
No, the doctor scene, that was...
accurate.
Yeah, that was delving into something that was real.
No,
and that was a problem.
I wanted more of those. Like, okay,
yes, I did too.
He's homosexual. He's schizophrenic. He's got brain damage. Like, I thought more of that. Trying to figure out that. Like, I feel like he probably did do that. A lot more of that. We needed more of that because it would have shown more about the struggle. Like, no, that's not how it is.
Right.
But once again, those scenes are so short. They're so short. They do it like a little montage.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, but that's interesting. Seeing about like how people thought about these things, the progression of it, I think that would have been a good side.
I mean, the whole radiation bit I thought was
once again
horrifying, but
once again very
realistic.
brief,
incredibly believable,
and
but
brief, all too brief, and
even the surgery was brief.
Yes,
I was like, oh, it's so terrible. This is like a scene.
It was like half a scene.
Okay, next scene.
She opens the door and he's already on the laughing gas, so he's like knocked out. And it's just like I want some emotions,
and that part
more than this.
I actually thought for a good like 15 minutes that the surgery was completed because he was just completely dressed as Lily. He was completely abandoned, so it was a success. Oh no, we got to go back and complete it. How long's gone by? Weeks, months?
Right,
I didn't
right.
like that part. That whole part was like
time jump was a little crazy there. I'll give you that one.
It was a little awkwardly handled. So there was definitely some things off about this one, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree. All right, well, up next, shifting gears a little bit, is Alvin and the Chipmunks, the road chip.
You tell me there's no cross-dressing in that one? Or?
There's the Chipettes, I guess.
Oh, well, at least they're gender appropriate, right?
Yeah, that is true.
Okay.
This is the fourth installment of the way past its prime series. Alvin, Simon, and Theodore clash with their father Dave's new girlfriend's son, Miles. So when Dave leaves on a business trip to Miami and takes his new girlfriend With the possibility of a marriage proposal, the Chipmunks and Miles decide they need to stop that from taking place and embark on a road trip to Miami. Typical family film situations ensue. Jason Lee returns as Dave, his girlfriend is portrayed by Kimberly Williams Paisley, and Josh Green is Miles. Tony Hale co-stars, and the voices of the Chipmunks and Chipettes include Justin Long, Jesse McCartney, and Christina Applegate, though I personally never understood the point of having famous people voice these characters. When the voices are so sped up, you can't really tell anyway. I never got that, but whatever. If it helps them sell tickets, that's fine.
Waste of money.
But listen, Alvin is another example of the third film in a series being basically unwatchable and the fourth one bouncing back slightly. In fact, for Alvin, I thought the second and third installments were just awful. But this one's actually okay. The first one I really enjoy. It's nothing like that, but in the road trip, the music is good. There's some fun sequences, and though most of the good lines are ones that only adults will enjoy, there's like a Foo Fighters gag at one point.
John Waters.
Yeah, John Waters has a cameo, but I think kids will definitely appreciate this too for different reasons than their parents might. I leave the road trip with a C.
It's actually higher than I was expecting.
Well, based on the second and the third one, it was higher than I was expecting, too. Those movies are god-awful.
Oh, wow.
But the first one I gave a B+ to. I really enjoyed the first film.
Huh.
So, it was nice to see it bounce back a little bit from that. Justin?
I don't think we're going to have much to argue with on this one, Dan. I hate to say it, but out of the 3 sequels to this abomination of a franchise, this is arguably the best. Though when the competition is an F and a D-, that's not really saying much.
Yeah, I don't think it's arguably the best. It's the best.
Where I have to give this one points over those last 2 is at least this one looks and feels like they had a story. I really can never forgive 3 inserting a character quite literally named Captain Corelli.
Whoa.
That was for the parents. That was like the Foo Fighters bit.
It's a formulaic one, and goodness knows it's beyond predictable, but hey, it works for the target audience. But any self-respecting parent is going to be likely spending the entirety of its 86-minute running time looking at their watches and wondering how long is this film going to last. Though, for the kids, it's probably bearable and more than likely going to get what they want out of it. I leave the road trip with a D+.
Oh.
I don't think it's that bad for parents. I mean,
It's pretty bad.
Yeah, but, I mean, I think there's some okay comedy for the parents. I think that the music is enjoyable for all ages. I mean, they do Uptown Funk. They do, Iko Iko from Rain Man. Kids don't know what that is, but parents will. I thought the music was enjoyable.
I think it's one of those cases with most musicals is there's a time and a place to insert a song number, and this just doesn't really have any good idea of when to do that.
Yeah,
like, okay, we're going to have random scene where Theodore decides to do Big Butts.
Okay, but at one scene they need some bus fare, so they decide to do a little show on the sidewalk. In another scene, they're in New Orleans. They go in a parade. I mean, I thought it made sense. I think parents will like this a lot better than 2 and 3. I think for the target audience, D+ is maybe a little harsh. I mean, kids are going to be on board. I don't think parents are going to hate it as much as certain other movies that we've reviewed this year alone in terms of kids stuff,
No, probably not, but I mean, it's still a little bit of a struggle.
All right. Well, next we have our home media moments, 2 of them this week, and the first one is Force Majeure. That's going to be with Justin.
This is a little bit of a late HMM, but here goes. All Tomas, played by, and I do apologize for the pronunciation in advance, Johannes Kunke, wanted was to have a nice vacation in the French Alps. Over the course of their trip, fears of an avalanche shake both the establishment and the family, eventually calling into question Tomas' role as a family patriarch. Force Majeure is a dark comedy where I found myself often questioning whether or not to laugh. And I think that's largely because of how the film presents its material. It's raw, but at the same time it's also witty in that regard, giving us these characters that you sort of have to get used to how they talk, how they're interacting with each other, and probably most importantly, how they're communicating with others. However, once the audience sort of is able to get into the rhythm of the storytelling, really gets this brutally honest, yet very, very cynical character study, adding a whole lot of complexity to a truly dysfunctional family, sort of going in the vacation route, but completely going in much, much darker directions over the course of its runtime. I think it doesn't always work, but I feel like the handling is very interesting. I think some of the conversations that occur over the course of the storyline are great. And when the humor does flow, when the humor does actually come in, I think when it hits, it is actually really funny. But it's definitely going to be of the love it or hate it variety. The only reason this isn't a higher grade than it is, ironically enough, a recurring theme this episode is, I thought the ending sort of just wrap up abruptly when I wished it kind of sort of got us there a little bit smoother. But overall, I thought this was a very interesting film that I was honestly surprised did not make it into last year's best foreign film. I leave Force Majeure with an A-.
Joe?
I can't really find too much to disagree with that statement. I thought that it's definitely committing one of the sins of film fanatics, for sure. Certain type of pornography.
Some scenery.
We won't go into. I think the best thing about the movie, though, is the conversations between the family. I think there's a lot of good stuff there. And I also do think it is beautifully shot. I think there's some good tension throughout most of it. I thought there were pieces of it that moved a little slowly, but for the most part, I enjoyed it. I wasn't initially on board immediately, but as it continued, I thought it progressively did get better. The ending was okay. I don't think it was super forced, but on the whole, I think it held together pretty well. Not the best foreign film I've seen recently, but pretty high up there. I leave it with an A- as well, actually.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you guys said. I was not sure at all what to expect with this one. I knew that there was an avalanche about it, so I was thinking it might be a disaster movie or a thriller. I just knew it had to do with an avalanche. It turns out more to be an episode of What Would You Do? The hidden camera show on ABC where they put people in situations. And because of that, I really loved the questions that it urges its audience to think about. It's really a great character study. I liked the conversations between the two couples. I liked the conversations between the husband and wife, between the kids. I think the acting's a little bit scattershot. I think they could have gotten into some deeper themes as well. It goes pretty deep, but I think we could have gotten a little bit more. I didn't really get the whole humor part. I didn't think it was that funny, Justin. I know I read, after I watched it, I read on Wikipedia that it is sort of considered a dark comedy. I think it's pretty dramatic.
It's definitely dramatic, but there's...
It's Calvary dark comedy.
It's like the thinnest veil of dark comedy that there is.
Like Calvary, I can actually get the dark humor of this.
Well, I found it, for the most part, was pretty dramatic, but some of the situations were kind of comedic. I think it was in the beginning of the movie where they're just kind of all sitting there, and it's just kind of this peaceful scene, and then there's an avalanche. It'll be fine. It's just part of, the event. Oh, God, that was kind of funny. In a weird...
I don't know. I thought that was pretty dramatic and tension-filled myself, but...
It was, but it was also... It was kind of so randomly interjected, you weren't expecting it. And I think that's kind of
I wasn't expecting it, but again, I didn't know what to expect from this movie at all, so... I definitely wasn't expecting that.
I thought things like that were kind of funny.
Okay.
But it wasn't like I was splitting sides.
Busting laughter.
Yeah, but I was like, that's kind of... I see what they're doing there.
Yeah, I agree with you, Joe. I think it's more like Cavalry.
It's like, oh,
it's a good comparison.
It is a good comparison.
You molested me. Some other guy molested me. I'm going to kill you now.
Ha ha ha.
That's
wait for the punchline.
Knee slapper there.
You'll be waiting the whole movie.
I leave Force Majeure with a B+. I do think it is good, and it probably deserved to be nominated this past year at the Foreigns, but I don't know. I mean, we've talked to death about all the different foreign nominees we've had, but
oh yeah,
I think these are probably up there, maybe close to them,
upper tier.
But I was okay that it wasn't nominated after all that. But I do think it posed some very interesting questions,
and I would agree.
Yeah, I always like that. All right, well, there's another character study that we have in the home media moment. And that's Match.
It's like most of these
movies
tonight are character studies.
Yeah. Well, Justin picked these two from the list of movies he had seen this year. So,
well, Match follows a Juilliard ballet professor who is Patrick Stewart. So he's like Professor X, but he can walk. Same guy. Being interviewed by a woman and her husband. That's Carla Gugino and Matthew Lillard. And apparently they come in under the concept of doing a dissertation on the history of dance in the 1960s, New York, and they're coming there to interview him because he was thriving around that time. But through their conversation, it becomes increasingly obvious that they have some ulterior motives, and the truth comes out that the husband, Matthew Lillard, apparently may be the long-lost son of this man who was the product of a brief fling he had back in the 1960s, and it's seeking a confrontation over his abandonment years ago. So I think you could definitely say this is a pretty dramatic film, but with some comedy in it.
For sure in this one, yeah.
I think definitely something clear we can all see there. I also had no idea what this one was about going in.
Me neither.
I thought something completely different. So when it started, I thought it was pleasant enough, but then they kind of dropped the little twist early on, like, whoa.
Where are we going now?
Just a complete upheaval. But I have to say, just everything in this movie was pretty well done. It's mostly just conversations, but about really intense drama. And I feel like, unlike with the Danish Girl, I feel like this one tackled some pretty heavy stuff and wasn't afraid to go completely all the way.
Paired it all.
And I mean, this almost doesn't need to be said, but Patrick Stewart gives a fantastic performance, which I'd say it carries the movie, but Carla Gugino does a really good job as well. I'd say almost on the same level. And Matthew Lillard kind of sporadically comes in and out, but some of his scenes are pretty intense too. Like this movie has a lot of intensity, but there is a lot of fun in it too, because Patrick Stewart plays this really interesting character, and we really do get to know a lot about him. And the ending of the movie kind of brings another twist, but it does add a whole nother layer onto it. So this movie was really complicated. Definitely something to prepare yourself going into, but I thought it was absolutely wonderful, and leave with an A+.
Wow, all right. Well, Justin, good pick.
Joe
Gives it an A+. Now, listen, there are some really good conversations in this. Great character development. Granted, I think the character development happens extremely quickly. I mean, this whole movie takes place over the course of not even a day. I mean, really a few hours.
Half day.
Like a half of a day. And I feel like there's a lot of tension built up before we even get to this movie. Like, Matthew Lillard's character obviously has a lot of deep-seated issues.
I didn't know what was going to happen there at
that
first.
Sort of, by the end, get resolved, I think, a little too neatly. But I think Stewart definitely gives a great, very subtle performance. I like that speech pattern he chose to affect for his character. I thought that worked. Gugino, I think, is always great. I think she's a very underrated actress.
Sin City's the only thing I can remember.
Sin City, okay. She did this really great
Mighty Max
movie called The Mighty Max a few years ago. Justin likes to make fun of, but he's never seen it, so that's fine. But yeah, it's her and Ellen Burstyn, actually.
Oh.
Classic Flowers in the Attic.
Was she good in San Andreas, though?
Actually?
Oh.
I was fine with her in San Andreas.
Okay.
Yeah, she didn't detract from it.
Nah, she did what she needed to do.
I would agree.
And Matthew Lillard as well. The Descendants was really the first time I saw him do something real dramatic. And I think he's a better actor than he's been given credit for as well.
Yeah.
I'm not quite on your level, Joe, because I do think it resolves too quickly, but it's certainly the best of the new movies this week. It's an A- for me.
Oh.
Justin?
The main draw for this is absolutely Patrick Stewart, who gives a fantastic performance, as to be expected. I mean, he's Picard.
It's true.
No, I just remember like seeing all the trailers for this, thinking like, okay, this is going to be like generic drama. Stewart does his thing, but no, he gives this really complicated character, a really interesting character who starts off as just being this guy who's like throwing little quips and pretend he's all and acting high and mighty, as we've seen so many times with Black Swan. But then we see this more complex, more grounded character as the film progresses, and see the key moments that sort of made him who he is, and how he's influencing the other two characters in the process of this storyline. I do grant you, Dan, I think one of the lesser points is the fact that it is so short that it sort of closes everything up a little too nicely. But I also think at the same time it opens the door for a lot of interesting things to happen at a fairly believable rate, I might add. Nothing feels hokey. There's a really nice air of honesty with this that I very much did appreciate. And I think that's what made it one of the more pleasant surprises of this year. I'm actually with you, Dan. I leave this one with an A-.
Yeah. And it's not that... I don't mind that they chose to do it in half a day. That's fine. But I just think that Lillard's character has so much pent-up rage at this man. Obviously, abandonment and, where have you been my whole life and this and the other thing. I mean, that's abundant in just about every scene he's in. I just think that it ends a little too neatly. Like, this is one where I could have seen an epilogue. Like, it could have ended, maybe before that last scene or two, or with that last scene or two, but maybe differently. And then you have an epilogue of a few months later or whatever, and just, I don't know, a phone call or, something where it's like, okay, they're still in communication with each other, whatever. I think that might have been maybe, for me, a little more believable.
Maybe a little less spur of the moment, so to speak.
Yeah. Joe, how do you feel about that?
I mean, I could see where you're coming from. I think the thing about it I liked the most, though, was that, ironically, that wasn't the focus. It was really him and the wife.
Well, that's very true.
And, I mean, that was the relationship that I think is, well, it's the one that's actually fused, and I thought that was believable. And I think that it's almost like there's another side of the story that could have been explored in an entirely different movie that they just chose not to focus on, which I think was intentional. Like, you'd think that the whole father-son relationship would be the focus, but it's not. It's actually more about this man kind of doing this introspective look at his life and his responsibilities and how he's looked at it through his relationship with this woman. And it just happens to be brought about by these believable circumstances, which is something that could happen. So I thought that was actually resolved pretty well.
No, I think you're right. I think that their dynamic is the focal point of the movie. And you're right, it's a little misleading because you think, well, it's about the father and the son.
Not really.
But it's actually not. True. And see, that story arc did resolve believably for me in that time period. Because obviously, there's not a ton of tension there, in terms of 40 years of build-up or whatever.
Well,
but
I guess for Lillard's character there is some tension, but it's kind of one of those things where... we can't assume certain things. I mean, we have to go with what's presented. He has all this anger and rage, but maybe if he got a certain resolution somehow, maybe that would be enough for him to change. I mean, that can happen.
I guess it's possible.
And plus, there is something that kind of happens towards the end of the movie, which sort of kind of alters the way it would typically go. So I think that resolved pretty well, actually.
All right, well, let's move into our top 5 here. We do this now annually. It's our third time running the most anticipated films for the upcoming year. And with that, we always sort of like to take a look back at what we said last year and how those movies panned out for us. Last year, my honorable mention was The Night Before, which I turned out to actually like that one the least on the show. Not too bad, but like a C+, I believe I gave it. I didn't know anything about this movie last year. It was just called the untitled Seth Rogen, Joseph Gordon-Levitt Christmas comedy. That was enough for me to be on board. My number 5 was Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. Great movie. Very happy I picked that one. Age of Ultron was my number 4, which was a bit disappointing. I think I gave it a B+. I mean, I didn't hate it, but...
It sucks.
But compared to the first Avengers, definitely a bit of a letdown. My number 3 was Kingsman: The Secret Service, which I'm very pleased with. That is really one of the true surprises of the year, of the pleasant variety. I really, really love that movie. Number 2, I picked Hunger Games: Mockingjay Part 2. That was another disappointing one for me. The worst of the series for me thus far. Well, thus far, there's no series left. I believe I left that one with a B-.
Yep.
And my number 1 last year was the Peanuts movie, which I was pretty happy with. It was about what I expected. I didn't think it would be like an A+, but... it certainly did the job that I thought it was going to do.
Peanuts' greatest hits?
Yeah, well, it was Peanuts' greatest hits, and I was happy with that. Justin, what did you have for your top 5 last year?
My honorable mention was Chappie, which was, to put it politely, not very good. But
A bit of a letdown.
But from the main list, I think I'm okay. Number 5 was Crimson Peak, which was not quite what I was hoping it was going to be, but I still enjoyed it. Number 4 was Jurassic World, which...
That's a good one.
Yeah, I liked it. I don't think it was the amazing movie everyone made it out to be, but number 3 we'll hopefully be talking about in a couple weeks, which is The Revenant. Don't think I've ever given Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu movie a low grade. And number 2 and number 1 were absolutely fantastic: Mad Max, Fury Road, and Inside Out.
Yeah, good calls there.
Okay, number 5 was Chappie, which I was okay with. I was expecting it to be like the best thing ever. It was okay. I liked it more than you guys, but
I didn't like it at all.
It was a pretty disappointing movie. But number 4 was Mad Max Fury Road, which was amazing. Number 3 was Spectre, which the more I think about, I did not like that movie very much for a James Bond. I was actually very disappointed with it. Number 2 was Age of Ultron, which was okay. It was Avengers movie. It was pretty good, but by our standards, not as good. And number 1 I can't talk about yet, which is The Hateful Eight, which
okay.
I'm hoping that'll be good. I think based upon Rotten Tomatoes, I'm sure I'm going to like it, but I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, we'll find out, I guess, next week or the week after. All right, well, let's see how this year stacks up. It's interesting nobody put Star Wars on their list. Joe, you and I like Star Wars a lot better than a couple of the movies on our list. I certainly liked it better than Hunger Games and Age of Ultron.
That's true. I guess at the time, I mean, well, I mean, I've talked about this before. I mean, the Star Wars fandom for me just isn't quite what it once was. I really have become much more of a Star Trek person over the years. So,
and I wasn't much of a fan at all.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, and like I said, you know, with the last couple movies that came out, the last one I saw in theaters was the Clone Wars cartoon movie, which was terrible. So my standards weren't very high.
There you go.
You know?
All right, well, for me, I do have an honorable mention again, and that is Ghostbusters. And I put this on here because I can't say I'm necessarily, like, happily anticipating it, but I'm definitely curious. I like the cast. I love Kristen Wiig. I love Melissa McCarthy. Kate McKinnon's very funny. I like Paul Feig movies, so I'm definitely intrigued, I guess I could say, about that. I don't think it's going to be amazing, but I think it'll be funny. Number 5 for me is Captain America Civil War. Hate that first Captain America. Winter Soldier, one of my favorite of the MCU. So I'm very interested to see what they do with Civil War. Obviously, I only kind of know peripherally about it. I know things that Joe has told me, you know, in the brief snippets I've seen. So that'll be interesting. Number 4 does not have a title yet, but it's the 5th film in the Bourne series. Very excited to see what they do with this. I think those movies, even the one without Matt Damon, was very good. And I guess they're both going to be together for this one, Jeremy Renner and Matt Damon.
Nice.
So
That's official now?
That's what I read, yeah.
Yeah, it's on the list.
So, I mean, it's definitely, they're filming it now. So
kind of weird it doesn't have a title when it's coming out in like less than a year.
Yeah, true. But, I mean, I guess the other ones were based on books, right?
Yeah.
And this is sort of like its own story, so.
The first 3 were, but they were
That's
all
what I mean.
sort of their own story, yeah.
Yeah. Not the Jeremy Renner one, but. So, we'll see. Number 3 for me is X-Men Apocalypse. I was the only one of us that did not have Days of Future Past on my anticipated list a couple of years ago, and I was wrong for that because that was a fantastic movie, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where they take the franchise. Number 2 for me is The Boss. This is one of the only real big movies next year that I've seen a preview for, and that was just this week in Sisters. Melissa McCarthy, other than Tammy, has a really good track record for me with her summer movies. Obviously, The Heat, Spy this year, and Identity Thief was not great, but I didn't hate it, as much as some people. I think the preview looks hysterical, so very much looking forward to seeing what she does there. Justin, how about for you for the 5 through 2?
I got to tell you, gentlemen, this was a difficult list because there was a lot of things I was considering, but I really am trying to avoid shots in the dark. But I feel like with 2016, when we really haven't seen a whole lot of trailers yet, it's almost unavoidable. But I'd like to kick mine off with an honorable mention as well, and that is Animal Lisa. And the reason that is because of release dates in particular. In regards, sort of like last year with Most Violent Year, where it was apparently supposed to come out in 2014, but they bumped it to 2015, but had a limited release. Charlie Kaufman, obviously being his interesting self, taking a very dark subject matter, doing it with stop motion. I have to confess, I'm intrigued in getting phenomenal reviews thus far. My number 5 is the BFG. No, not the very, very profane gun from the Doom franchise, but an adaptation from a Roald Dahl story I loved as a kid, and I'm honestly surprised it took him this long to get a live-action film underway. It's Steven Spielberg. I'm probably going to be a lifelong fan. I'm very excited to see what he's going to do with this. My number 4 is The Free State of Jones. It's been a long time since we had a Civil War movie, but Gary Ross, who did the original Hunger Games as well as Pleasantville, one of Dan's favorites, is working on this. I think he's right at home with period pieces. I'm excited to see what he's going to do when he's got actors in it like Matthew McConaughey and Gugu Mbatha-Raw. Hey, bring it on. My number 3 is La La Land. This is the second film from Damien Chazelle, who we all loved from Whiplash. Unfortunately, no Miles Teller this time, but we do have J.K. Simmons, as well as reuniting Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone.
I thought about looking into that because I saw a picture of them dancing the other day. I was like, oh, I wonder if that is going to be any good.
An angry dance instructor this time?
Hey, you never know. I know the main theme is jazz and it's a musical, but I couldn't tell you much more than that. And my number 2 is A Monster Calls. This is from J. Bayona, I believe, who did The Impossible as well as The Orphanage. Joe, I don't know if you ever saw that.
Del Toro?
Del Toro produced. He did not direct.
Yeah, I saw a ghost movie. It was okay.
Yes, quite.
Pretty good.
This is an adaptation of a book that I came across by accident over the course of 2015. I just got hooked on it. And I think mostly because it's a very more adult-oriented fairy tale. Sort of in the likes of Pan's Labyrinth, but not quite as that dark. And I'm very curious to see how they're going to pull it off. I think the director's fantastic. I love the fact that he got Liam Neeson and Felicity Jones to be a part of it. There is a trailer out right now. It doesn't show a whole lot, but I'm very excited to see how it'll come together.
Joe, I have the feeling you did more what I did with this and just sort of went off the names that we know already.
Yeah,
I didn't do too much digging into this.
Or trailers. Or
trailers that we've seen, yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to... Should I talk about some of the things I decided to kick off? No, you know what? No, I'll do that later. I will start off with an honorable mention, though, I guess, which is... heck with it. Central Intelligence. Actually, okay. I don't think Kevin Hart's like the best thing ever, but The Rock and Kevin Hart together looks like a pretty funny combo.
Yeah, it might be.
The trailer I thought was pretty hilarious. So, hope if this lives up to it, that could be good. My number 5 is Independence Day 2, because this is needed to happen.
I couldn't do it
for a long time. And if this movie is as awesome as the original one was, that's fine with me. Just keep that goofiness. No Will Smith, though, so gotta live to love, too. Number 4 is Hail Caesar, because Coen Brothers.
Thought about it.
Short list.
Number 3 is The Witch, because it looked really scary, and apparently it's gotten some good reviews.
It has.
And
what's The Witch?
Horror movie coming out February?
Ish, yeah. Might be limited.
Looked really. It's like it takes place like in the pre-colonial era or colonial era, like 1600s, and
cool.
There's like literally a witch out in the woods. It looks really creepy, and people are like, one best independent thing. Like, oh, cool. Number 2 is Zootopia, because that newest trailer looked really... The whole sloth thing just... So good. So good. Like that
was great.
That was really good. I'm like, you know what? Hey, that's fine. It's not Pixar, but I'll give Disney one. I've been pretty impressed with the last couple movies, so who knows?
All right. Well, gentlemen, it's been 3 years in a row now. 2 years ago was Muppets Most Wanted. Last year was the Peanuts movie. This year, another kids movie. It is Finding Dory. I'm super pumped for this. I love Finding Nemo. I think Dory is the best character in Finding Nemo. I love Ellen DeGeneres. Pixar, other than their Cars 2 stumble, has not disappointed me. Well, Good Dinosaur. But anyway, didn't really expect much from that. But yeah, Finding Dory, I'm very, very excited for. That is my number 1. Justin?
All right. Well, gentlemen, I did, as you can probably tell from my last couple picks, did a lot of digging for this one.
Yeah.
And I was trying to... I thought about finding something that there was an established trailer for, a lot of people knew. But I came across this movie that just... As soon as I looked up all the information about it and watched the trailer, I just said, this is it. This is me. Kubo and the Two Strings.
Okay.
We have Laika. It's their 4th installment. I can forgive them for the box trolls for this one. The cast includes, but is not limited to... Fiennes, Charlize Theron.
Which Fiennes?
Rafe.
Oh, all right.
George Takei.
Oh.
And Rooney Mara.
That is totally you, yeah.
Some of your favorites.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
And it's a Laika movie, wow.
And it is Laika.
It will be your favorite movie,
Very cool.
That's true.
Joe?
Well, might surprise you guys, but my most anticipated movie probably is Captain America Civil War. Because, we're at the point where... it's either going to end soon or it's just going to keep going. And Civil War is like kind of one of the bigger storylines that Marvel had in the last decade. And if they can match up to that while changing huge things regarding it, I think this could really take the Marvel Cinematic Universe into an area I want it to go. Let's actually tackle some dark stuff. Let's have some tension with their characters. Let's break away from the safe, fun popcorn that every other movie has been. Let's just delve a little bit deeper.
But Kevin Feige said they'll never go dark, Joe.
Well, they have to. Now, I have to include this though, because I just feel like ranting. Were you surprised that some other movies weren't on my list?
I was surprised that Deadpool's not on your list.
Okay. Well, first of all, I don't like Deadpool as a character.
Okay.
So yeah. Batman vs Superman. I considered
I knew that wasn't going to be on your
I
list.
considered it, but it's gonna be terrible.
Suicide Squad was on the short list for me, though.
No, not.
I knew that wasn't going to be on Joe's, and I thought maybe X-Men.
Age of Apocalypse, though. There is a reason for that.
Go on. Oh, I know what it is.
And Dan won't have any idea what I'm talking about.
Does it rhyme with Mr. Sinister?
It does rhyme. There is... Apocalypse is like the big X-Men villain, right? Mm-hmm. But there's a guy right under him that they're skipping. There's like there's an underling that in the comics they always have this guy introduced, and then they go, he's my favorite X-Men villain. So he better be in the next movie.
He might be in it.
I don't care how well made it is. I'm gonna be angry if he's not in the last end credit thing.
All right, well, closing up our show is our double feature of older films. We are kicking off Guilty Pleasure Month. This has been another annual tradition here on the show. It's the third year we've been doing this, and it was Justin's pick to go first this year, and he chose Armageddon.
Or Armageddon, as it's known in some circles.
Upon the discovery of a meteor the size of Texas, because apparently to NASA statistics don't really matter, heading for Earth on a collision course, a team of NASA scientists led by Dan Truman, played by Billy Bob Thornton, scramble to search for a solution. He enlists the likes of sea oil driller Harry Stamper, played by Bruce Willis, and his band of misfits to travel on a mission to fly inside the asteroid and split it in two to save the world. Ben Affleck, Michael Clark Duncan, and Steve Buscemi also star. Gentlemen, I promised you both Anti-Rocket Man, and I feel like I succeeded. Armageddon is a monumentally stupid movie. And I think it's that kind of stupidity that just makes it so glorious. It's just one of those movies that ever since I was a kid, I find myself staring at it going, how did no one say this is too much? And apparently reading more into it, quite a few people said it was way too much, but Michael Bay just kept rolling with it. And I think it's so gloriously dumb that I think it's amazing that Criterion has decided to preserve it.
Well, it was one of the early ones, apparently, so they weren't worrying about quality too much.
It was number 40, but I think now they're like on 700 or something.
That's early, I think.
But, I mean...
I think 40 out of 700 could be considered early.
I don't
think... Okay.
Actually,
we can take that.
To be honest.
And I'll give them the slack there, I guess.
But, I mean... It's one of those things that's just... It's kind of the film equivalent of watching a car crash. You just got to see what's happening next in this one.
It's terrible.
And the dialogue is horrible in some spots, and some of the dramatic moments are reduced to, like, just minor shots. But I think some of the visuals are incredibly impressive, especially knowing that, according to legend, Bay was doing it almost entirely by himself near the end of it. But I think it's one of those glorious failures that just sort of has its special place in my heart. I leave Armageddon with a C+.
Just skating by on the OCT.
I mean, I debated B-, but I mean, it's...
That's definitely your lowest that you've ever brought us on Old Classic, for sure.
Well, I mean, there was Rocket Man, but...
That doesn't count as a movie.
Rocket Man.
Continue.
Wait, you gave this the same grade as Rocket Man?
I did, in fact.
That makes me so angry. Okay, well, this movie is much better than Rocket Man.
That's good.
But it is classic Michael Bay.
Yeah.
You know, it's poor script meets corny action sequences meets overacting. It works better than most, though, probably about the same as the first Transformers for me. Liv Tyler is wooden, as always. There's virtually no chemistry between her and Affleck. But Affleck and Willis actually have great chemistry. You know, they have some good back and forth as the adversaries that are forced to be on the same side, you know, to save the world. You know, it's definitely bad, but I agree that I think it probably knows that it's bad.
It kind of just runs with it.
It just sort of runs with it. I mean, Billy Bob Thornton's having a great time as always.
Yeah.
This was the era like where I really liked him. I mean, I still do to a degree, but
this was his.
He's asleep now.
This
he's
is probably
sort
Bad
of just
Santa.
sleepwalks through things now. Once they got to like Mr. Woodcock era, I was like, all right, I'm kind of over this.
Oh,
but it's good. C+.
Oh.
Joe?
Well, I mean, I think this movie. I remember loving it when I was younger, like a lot.
This was my first time seeing it, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys know that. I should point that out to the listeners.
Oh, I remember loving it.
Yeah.
I think some scenes definitely don't hold up. Like, I did not realize how bad an actress Liv Tyler was.
Awful.
It didn't.
This is the worst time, and she's not usually good, but this is the worst I've ever seen her.
She's terrible.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, those romance scenes are like Attack of the Clones level bad writing. Like there's some dumb science, and there's a lot of scenes that go on way too long. Like it's too long. There's a lot
It is too long.
It's
Well, all
ridiculously
Michael
too
Bay
long.
movies are.
way too long with a lot of pointless stuff. But some of the performances are actually pretty good. Like Bruce Willis is actually pretty good. Some of the dynamic stuff with him and Affleck's good. Like Affleck got hated on a lot. He's okay in this.
Yeah, I think he's all right.
He's fine. Steve Buscemi's lines are hilarious.
Yeah, he was good.
The Russian guy, he's in everything Coen Brothers related. He's funny in this. There's a lot of good comedy bits. Some of the action's good. Some of the visuals are good. The main story holds up pretty well. I actually like it a little better than you guys. Leave it with a B-.
Yeah, I mean, the main story's okay.
Yeah.
It's pretty basic, like Justin said. I mean, it's, generic, but it works for what it is.
Yeah, this was one of those that usually I spend some time thinking about how I'm going to write the synopsis, and I got to Armageddon, I was just thinking, meteor come down on Earth. We go fight meteor.
But see, I have to think, Justin, this is the kind of movie that if like me, you were seeing this for the first time now, I think you would hate it. I think there's a lot of nostalgia for both of you with this movie because it was a huge hit, obviously.
For me, it is.
Well, I
Definitely.
mean, I saw it as a kid broken up. This is the first time watching it in full in one full sitting. So I mean,
This is your first time watching it in full?
In full.
I know you said that your dad turned off the strip scene, but other than that, you hadn't seen the movie in full?
Like I said, I saw it in parts.
Uh-oh.
It's not really fitting with the criteria of a classic, but all right.
No, I mean it was. I did see the whole movie. It was just
like piece by piece.
It's not one sitting. Okay. I have to say that I do remember loving it. Like when I was younger, a lot. I mean, I think by younger Joe Mandu probably would have been like what?
A-.
Probably. I really dug this movie a lot, and I was really into it.
When was the last time you watched it before this?
It's been a long time.
Years and years?
I want to say I was probably like a teenager. Maybe like 14 or 15.
Better than me.
Okay, so maybe 15 years ago.
It came out. I was allowed to see it because my parents had given me a pass to see Titanic. Though at the time the trailer really freaked me out. I had a fear of trailers at the time. It's a really long story.
That's changed.
It has dramatically.
So many trailers.
Christ.
But
now the trailers fear you.
And Soviet Russia trailer fears you.
Yeah.
I think that's the quote of this episode. No,
thank you.
This is good.
But no, it came. We got a brief week subscription to I think it was Stars, and that's how I ended up watching it. And my dad recorded it. And we just sort of watched it in bits, obviously skipping over random and basically pointless stripper scene.
It was very pointless.
It's
come on. You know that's true.
Well, I'll be honest with you. You won't believe this, but watching the movie again, that's like the one scene I don't remember at all.
Really?
Like the whole stripper thing, which is total Michael Bay.
And you were a real sicko back
I was
then,
sick.
too,
I was really into that stuff. And I don't remember that segment at all.
Interesting.
Must have been.
Well, because it has no purpose being in this film.
Well, a lot of scenes like that
pointless.
which don't matter.
Interestingly enough, I used to give my dad a lot of crap for fast forwarding that scene because he called it the boring part. And now, having finally seen that, I understand, oh my gosh, it really is truly the boring part.
I think in that particular instance, he was not trying to shield you from the nudity. He was really saving you from the boring part.
Saving you time.
Because it was. There's nothing, that scene's useless.
And it gets resolved immediately. Like, oh, they get arrested. Oh, we're astronauts.
It does.
No.
Don't care, we're astronauts.
Yeah, pretty much. All right, well, let's see what's coming up later on this month with Guilty Pleasure. But right now we have our Oscar A to Z film. That's Becky Sharp this week. And this is a 1935 film nominated for Best Actress for Miriam Hopkins. It's based on the novel Vanity Fair from the mid-19th century. Becky Sharp, played by Hopkins, is a lower-class girl with higher aspirations who ends up linking up with a number of wealthy and high-profile gentlemen, and causes her to be the bane of her social circle, which includes a friend played by Billy Burke, otherwise known as Glinda the Good Witch. That was fun. But by far the most notable thing about Becky Sharp is that it's the first feature-length Technicolor film. I believe that's probably why it's remembered.
Oh, that's what it was.
It used a 3-strip process that was remarkably innovative at the time, and for a long time that print was not available. And then about 20 years ago, it was restored to its Technicolor brilliance. Now, unfortunately, the easiest accessible version is from a 16mm Cinecolor print with dull colors. I don't know how you gentlemen saw it. That's how I watched it.
I saw it on YouTube. Right?
And you saw it on YouTube, which I believe is also the inferior.
It was crappy quality.
So unfortunately, the version we watched for this review is that dull print. It certainly didn't do the film justice. So, listeners, if you can try and seek out the real McCoy, go ahead and do that. It is available on DVD for just a little bit more money. But story-wise, Becky Sharp, fairly standard for the themes and the story it covers in a classic sense. You get, the classic overacting of the mid-30s, but there's not much inherently wrong with the film. It just sort of is very standard. But in 1935, it was obviously incredibly groundbreaking with the color, so I'll leave it with a B+. Joe?
Yeah, that's pretty much all I had to say. I didn't know that, though. Mm-hmm. That's actually really cool. That does change it a little bit. I think that definitely for historic significance, you got to check it out for that, just to kind of put it on your list. Inherently the story, I thought it was okay. I kind of liked the play. I didn't know it was based on Vanity Fair. Mm-hmm. That's actually kind of cool. I thought the acting was okay. Maybe just standard type of acting for the time.
Yeah.
Nothing inherently bad. I thought it was okay. Not really my typical thing, but yeah, it's all right. I'd leave it with a B, actually.
Okay. Justin?
Well, I mean, from a technical standpoint, Becky Sharp is truly one for the ages. I mean, to appreciate the fact that it was the first Technicolor film is great, but that still leaves the central story, which is a bit of a... I'll be frank, I thought it was a bore. Now, granted, the performances by 30 standards are not bad. I think it's just more or less... Let me rephrase that. I feel like cinema just still was struggling with that area where the stage ends and film begins, and it wasn't that well established yet. So there was overacting. It really irritated me when I was watching it. In retrospect, I think it got a little bit better, but the color is really the main attraction for this one. And I mean, they are doing the main material justice. Though the biggest problem for me is basically the main issue I have with Vanity Fair and it being an adaptation of a play as an adaptation of that. Everybody in the story is just basically a manipulative scumbag, and there's not really anyone to get behind. I leave this one with a B.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I can't say anybody's necessarily like,
Oh, the Teresa here?
You want to root for him.
Huh.
But, I mean, I feel like we get a lot of this in this era of film, I mean, her friends were okay.
No, like, some of the supporting cast was likable. It was just, like, the main players.
Her and her suitors.
Take it or leave it.
Yeah, take it or leave it. But yeah, definitely, listeners, if you can seek out that, original Technicolor version, do so. There were a few short films that were, before this in Technicolor, but this was the first feature, so, yeah. Joe, that's why it exists.
Because I'll be honest, I didn't think it was like that great, but yeah, now that I know that, I understand why that's been preserved. Because it didn't seem like it really did much that stood out to me.
No, it's fairly basic.
To be fair, though, I think a lot of the Oscar noms you could possibly say that about, but I was kind of confused about it being in color 35, and then plus the quality. I wasn't sure if that was like a redo or what. So I'm glad that was clarified. Mm-hmm. I didn't know. That was good.
Yeah, because I was reading up about it after I watched it, and I was like, oh, that makes sense why it was so, like, sort of washed out color. Uh-huh. Because it was this sort of dull, reprint or whatever, on the 16mm. But, yeah, good early Technicolor. I do wish the movie was better, but,
You'll have that.
Yeah, you'll have that. It's got, you got to have your milestone somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
You don't know ahead of time if it's going to be, a masterpiece or if it's going to stink.
Movers and shakers are not always the best pieces.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, that's going to do it for the show this week. We will have our Best of 2015 minisode very soon, and then after that, we'll tackle some of the other recent releases. We're going to take care of Concussion and Daddy's Home, and Joe mentioned earlier The Hateful Eight, so those will all be coming up. All right, and that is going to do it for us. You can check out our 5-word reviews weekly on the Facebook group, Film Fanatics with an exclamation point, and the Twitter feed at Film Fanatics Pod. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you back here next week. Bye!